Well, welcome to Accounting Student Success. This is the first video in what we hope will be a long line of tutorials for accounting students, business students, or people who are just wanting to understand more about accounting. We've created these videos as a way for accounting students to increase their learning outside the classroom or maybe better enhance the explanation of accounting topics, as well as business students who you probably aren't going to become accountants, but learning accountancy and accounting is perfect because it allows you to understand the businesses where you'll eventually be working one day. And lastly, we've also created these tutorials to be more of a self-help for those who maybe didn't major in business or accounting, and yet you want to take more control of your finances, and in order to do that, you need to understand accounting. Accounting is interesting because we all have one thing in common, and that's we all use money. And accounting is a way of, or the way of how we keep track of our money. And regardless if you are ever going to create a company or you're an engineer, scientist, whatever the case may be, you still should understand how accounting works and how you can take control of money in your own personal life. So that being said, we get right into what is accounting. Now, in your classes or in a textbook, if you read on accounting, you would more than likely see a definition that looks something like this. And that's basically accounting is the method of the classification, allocation, and recording of the transactions that occur within a business. Now, this is great. However, I think that one of the ways that a lot of students get lost while they're learning accounting in the beginning is because there's a lot of accounting jargon. There's a lot of different words that we use when we're talking about accounting that we don't use in other classes. So I like to think of accounting as this definition. It's the language of business. And if you're going to be in business, you need to learn how to speak accounting. Even if you're never going into business and will never own your own business, you still should understand the language of business. For instance, if you are going to ever apply for a mortgage or a loan, the bank will be speaking accounting as their language to see if you are right for the loan or if they're going to give you any money at all. So understanding this will be helpful even in your own personal life if you're not an accounting student. However, a lot of people tend to give accounting a bad rap. I don't know what it is. Maybe too many people had their GPA destroyed by an accounting class. I don't really know what the issue is, but there seems to be a lot of accounting myths, and there's a few that most people have heard when they're coming into accounting, or they think that that's what accounting is. And so before we jump into today, I just want to show a little bit about these myths and how they're actually not true. So let me get my pointer here. Alright, and the first myth is that accounting is hard. Alright, accounting is different. Alright, it's not hard, it's just different. And what I mean by that is if you're in a history class and you're studying the Revolutionary War and you don't understand the Revolutionary War, you think, oh, well, it doesn't matter because when we get to the Civil War, this will be an entirely different subject and I might still do really well in this class regardless if I don't understand the Revolutionary War. Or let's say English, you are writing a persuasive essay and you hate persuasive essays. Well, the next one might be a declarative essay. So you can see how a lot of classes, they don't typically build on each other or they have enough differences. Accounting builds on each other. So whatever you don't understand in the beginning chapters, you will not understand the later chapters at all because everything you do constantly builds on each other. Another myth is that accounting has lots of hard math. If you are an accounting major, you've probably heard this by now, and if you won't, then it's just coming up behind the corner, that when you tell someone you're an accounting major or that you're learning accounting, they say, right after asking you if you can do their taxes, they tell you that you must be really good at math because accounting's a lot of math. Again, this is a myth because to be good at accounting, all you have to do is know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Okay? All we use are 4 functions in accounting. Alright? What I equate to be hard math is calculus and trig. Alright? That's hard math. Accounting is not hard math. Lastly, I've gotten that accounting is boring, and this was something that I heard from many of my students when I was teaching, is that it's boring. And really, it all depends. Granted, the teacher who you might be learning accounting from might not deliver the information the best way, or maybe you just think of numbers as boring to begin with because maybe you like writing. But I encourage you, as you study accounting, to look at how it can apply to your own life, managing your own personal finances, seeing opportunities using money that you can apply to your own life. And all of a sudden, by application, accounting may not be boring anymore. It could be exciting, or I'm pushing it a little bit on that one, but you can see where if you can apply something to your life, it will be much more meaningful and maybe not as boring as you're going through this class. Alright, so like I said, this is the introduction for financial accounting. And what is financial accounting? It's for external users. What I mean by that is, let's say we have a company. Alright, this is company, whatever name you want. You can insert Target, McDonald's, Walmart, whatever the case may be. This is your favorite company. In this company, we have employees and people who work inside the company. Alright? These are going to be our internal users. But then also outside the company, we've got a series of people such as investors, if it's a publicly traded company. We'll have banks who lend this company money. And we might also have some regulatory commissions such as the SEC or the PCAOB, alright, Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. And basically, financial accounting is the information that we give to these outside users of the company's information, and they are able to use that information to assess how well our company is doing, whether or not they're going to lend us money, things of that nature. And in a different lesson, we'll cover what goes on inside the company, inside these 4 walls right here. And this will be what the internal and management accounting will cover, but that will be a different lesson. Alright, so basically, accounting records the transactions. That's all accounting does. That's the purpose of it. It's merely so that we can keep track of what happens inside the business, or if it's a person, happening inside their lives, monetarily speaking. But we're going to stick with the company for today because I find it's a little bit easier to equate things to it because we have experience shopping and going to stores in our regular lives. So again, let's bring up this picture of the company. And let's think about this for an instance, alright? Think of the last time you went shopping. Whatever company it was, I don't care. Whatever type of industry it's in, I don't really care as well. But the key is that you think about when you went shopping. Alright? So let's think about what happened when you went shopping. Well, more than likely, the company sold you goods. And in exchange for these goods, you gave them cash, or you put it on a credit card, which the company then converted to cash by contacting your credit card company. Alright? So, that's pretty straightforward. Now let's look at the flip side of this. And in order for the company to give you goods to sell, they had to buy goods themselves from a supplier at one point in order so that they could resell them to you. And in addition, the company paid their suppliers cash for that. Okay? Now, this is all straightforward. We've participated in this. The goal of this tutorial and the other tutorials is that accounting is full of a lot of jargon, and I want to break down for you using everyday words the jargon that eventually will come out in our lessons. But in order to really understand accounting, if we think about it in everyday terms and just what it is, it might help demystify some of these terrible myths that have been spread about accounting and the industry. Alright, so let's think about the company that we just went to, that one you shopped at. Alright? Well, more than likely, and I'm willing to bet 99.9% of all the companies that you've been to had a building. You walked into a building, maybe unless you shop heavily on Amazon, then you would have walked into a building at some point to buy something. So the company would have to purchase or lease a building or a vehicle if it was a delivery service or something like that. And in return for that, again, the company pays out cash to whoever it bought it from or the company that's leasing it from. All right? And then as from our last basic accounting or business transaction, all right, we think about this as what happens if the company needs more money? Well, you're going to borrow that money from a bank, right? You're going to borrow the money from the bank, and you are going to, in return, pay interest to the bank. Okay? So we're kind of breaking down the transactions, and we see some basic ones. These don't encompass all the transactions that a business might have. We'll get into more complicated ones later on. But you can see how just looking at everyday activities that we can visualize in our minds, that accounting really isn't all that difficult. And lastly, I'm going to add this in here just because I find it will help a little bit as we're going to be talking about publicly traded companies, is that the company might sell stock. And in return for that stock, the company might pay dividends to their shareholders. All right, I'm going to abbreviate shareholders SH for lack of room. All right, so these are going to be some of the basic transactions we're going to be looking at. And if we look on the next page, here's a great visual of what we just covered. And it's got the little equity section. That's what we're going to be calling things that happen inside the business. But the ones at the top are more items that we don't see on a day-to-day basis, whereas everything else we can kind of see how it fits into day-to-day activities. This graphic is available on our blog, so if you would like to download it and keep it as a study tool or whatever the case it might be for you, I welcome you to download this and use it however it will, just so that you can kind of see different transactions, and the arrows reflect what direction the cash is going or the buildings or whatever a case may be, whether it's coming into the company or going out of the company. That's what the arrows symbolize. Alright, so now we've seen some of the basic transactions. Alright, because if we go back, we see all these little transactions, and transactions are really just events that happen to the company in their course of business. And so accounting is just classifying these transactions like we saw on the first slide that was the textbook definition of accounting. Well, the way we use accounting to classify these transactions is we use accounts. And go figure, right? So that's probably where it got its name from. But let's think about it this way. Here's a little visual that might help. Alright, so we have all these transactions that are happening to the business. And then we also have all these little buckets that we can use to classify this information. All right, we have all sorts of little buckets. All right, these are pretty much what the accounts do. All right, just the little buckets. And what we do is we group the transactions so that way we put them in areas where they are with similar transactions that had these parts. For instance, we might have a cash bucket, and therefore all the transactions that have happened with cash would get put into this bucket. We might have buildings or property, plant, and equipment. All right, that's a fancy name for buildings and equipment, is property, plant, and equipment, or land, things like that. We might put it in this bucket. And accountants usually have different ways of names of how we use these accounts, and they're pretty much standard for the industry. Some of them have different names, but pretty much we use a cash account. We use accounts receivable account. Now this is going to be a word that pretty much comes up in accounting, and it's one of those accounting jargon words I was telling you about. But if we break this down and look at it, this word right here almost spells receive. And what happens when you receive something? Well, you're getting something. And in this instance, we are getting money from our customers. So an accounts receivable is money that we will one day receive from our customer. Inventory, another one of those fancy words. This would be product, or it's things that you are going to sell. Alright, that's all inventory is. Again, it's what you bought from the store. If you go and buy a desk from Target, that was once their inventory, and then they sold it to you. So that's how it gets put into inventory. Like I said, plant, property, equipment, just a fancy name for what you might call buildings, land, cars, etc. Alright, enough of that. Now we get into accounts payable. Now notice, accounts payable and accounts receivable, they have very similar names. Alright? And also notice that the beginning of this word is pay. So accounts receivable was something we are eventually going to receive from our customers, which is money. And accounts payable is something that we're eventually going to pay our suppliers or people that we bought stuff from in order to sell it to our customers. Or it could be bills that we have to pay. Okay, that's what accounts payable is. Bonds payable. Again, note the word. It's identical to the one up here, which is the same thing as something we are about to pay or going to pay in the future, except this one is related to bonds. Common stock. Alright, this is what investors purchase or invest in. Alright. Now, when they purchase that, they own a piece of the business. And when they hold on to that, they are entitled to part of the revenues and the profits that the business makes, as well as the expenses. Okay? And lastly, we have retained earnings. This is one that's you don't really see this in any other classes, and it's kind of weird, but if we just break it down, retained earnings, right? The corporation or the company, whoever it is, they will be making money and they'll be making profits, they'll be bringing in income, they'll be paying their expenses, and whatever's left over, let's think about this. If the company wants to ever buy more property, plant, and equipment, some buildings or land, or maybe they want to buy more inventory, maybe they just want more cash on hand. Okay? Whatever the case may be, by retaining these earnings into the business, the company can use them again. So this would be something like residual. It stays within the business and they can use it in later periods. Like I said, in future videos we're going to dive into all these different accounts and slowly introduce different accounts and how they're used. The biggest thing is just to kind of look at a high level at what some of the basic accounts mean and how we'll use them. Alright, so that was the introduction to financial accounting. We learned several things, such as financial accounting is for external users. It's going to be those people who are not inside the company working, but maybe have invested in the company, have lent the company money, and have done things that they will want to see what the company has been up to and their results. And therefore, this information that gets distributed is useful. Alright, we also learned that accounting is the language of business. Whether it's for your personal life or whether it's for doing actual accounting, you need to be able to speak the language of business to prevent being taken advantage of, or to be able to speak intellectually about businesses and their operations. Alright, we also learned that the purpose of accounting is to record the transactions that occur within the company, and we also learned that the transactions are just what happens to the company on the daily basis and what goes on within the company that they are required to keep track of so that they can let their external users know what's going on. And we also learned that accounting classifies transactions, and by doing so they are able to use accounts to create all this different classification that makes accounting so neat. And it could also be another reason why students tend to have trouble, because accounting requires you to remain organized and to be classified, and it just is very orderly. And for some students and myself when I started, the amount of organization is not normal, and so this is kind of where also some things might come into play and be a little bit tricky. So these were pretty much a recap from today's lesson. If there's anything you need to go over, I encourage you to watch the video again, and I look for more videos on different accounting subjects. I hope to be rolling these out as they come in. And if you also have any questions, feel free to email the email address that's provided at the end of this video, and I look forward to doing more tutorials with you. Have a great day.